Clear. All right, we're ready to go ahead and to engage this. We're excited about this. This is perhaps one of the most important geopolitical events of our time, facing the nation as well as the world. What we're going to do, we're going to begin a lead-in. My co-moderator, Dr. Paul Chabot, and I will kick us off with asking a couple of questions for each of our panels. After that, we will then begin the process of what we call the general questions that are given out. We will put them out for each one of the group to respond for discussion. And at the following, when the conclusion of the hour and 15 minutes of this panel, we will then have 25 minutes allowed for Q&A questions. So let's go ahead and dive in right away. And I would like to direct this question to Abtin Vaziri. In an interview, Abtin, that you had recently with the Dallas Express earlier this year, you shared a personal story of your father, who served as an Iranian Imperial Air Force, was court-martialed and during the 1979 Iranian Revolution for simply voicing his opinion. They didn't think that Iran should be led by a Sharia-led court. And he was also given a death sentence. In your words, you described this incident as a Marxist Islamic government that had taken over the country. I would like to open up a question for you, Mr. Vaziri. Could you tell us, were you using the phrase Marxist Islamic government as a metaphor for oppressive regime, or is the regime in fact that of a Marxist Islamic, what we would call red-green axis of tyranny?
Thank you, Mark. I think it's, no, I wasn't using it as a metaphor. I was using it for very specific. And, many of you have heard the story of me talking about my father. My father was an Iranian Air Force officer in the early 70s, 72, 74, 76. He did almost all of his training here in the U.S. in San Antonio in Biloxi, Mississippi. So, that's back when Iran and the U.S. were close allies. And, he did his logistics training here, language training, all of that. And, many Iranian Air Force officers were trained, all the pilots were trained here. Iran was one of the largest purchasers of U.S. Planes, Air Force jets, and had all the latest jets, and was one of the closest allies to the United States and Israel in the Middle East. And my father, he was here in '76. They got, or '77, whenever they got pregnant with me. Went back to Iran. I was born in '78, and then the revolution happened. He got court-martialed, given a death sentence, and he was waiting his execution. And then the Iran-Iraq war started, and they needed people in logistics, so they gave him a pardon. And part of that, the deal was that he had to go back and serve, otherwise they would execute him. So he went, essentially the government that tried to execute him, he had to go serve under. But he looked at it as serving his own country, and from another crazy invader, which was Saddam Hussein at the time. But some of the things that my father actually instilled in me, and some of the things that he explained, is that imagine these uneducated mullahs that had taken a new government over, and they set up their opposition. And my father went to one of the meetings and noticed the guys that were setting up this opposition group to have a coup d'etat all had beards. And he said, under the Shah, Air Force officers weren't allowed to have beards, so he didn't trust it. He went to one meeting, and then at work he had expressed his desire to have a secular government. He didn't want an Islamic government, and that was enough to earn him a death sentence. But the sophistication of the operations that they're running to have their own opposition set up to figure out who's against them, this wasn't something, clerics and mullahs came up with. This was a very sophisticated Soviet operation, and this was, they were getting instructions from the Soviets. And the other thing was Yasser Arafat and Rafsanjani and Khamenei, these were people all trained under the Soviet Union in Marxist terrorist camps in the former Soviet republics, the Eastern European blocs. Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, Romania, that's where they did all these training. That's where Rafsanjani and Yasser Arafat and Khamenei met, and Khamenei was a Soviet spy. And so this wasn't an accident. And then, this is a tell for all the kids here today that think that communism, Marxism, is this fantasies that they believe, you can drive your BMWs and have, a communist government. What they don't realize is that, the Stalin's, term useful idiots, they used as the communists as useful idiots. The mullahs, the Islamists were the most brutal. So they used the communists, they got into power, and then they started killing off all the communists. The communists created their own organization called the Mujahideen Khal, which is MEK, which is a terrorist organization. Unfortunately, that terrorist organization was removed from the State Department terrorism list in 2002 under Hillary Clinton and Obama. And today, they're in Washington lobbying, trying to get back in power, by the way. And they're a Marxist Islamist cult. And they're, by the way, worse than the current regime that we had, if you could believe that.
Thank you. Dr. Chabot, the second question.
This was very organized.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Same. Abteen, by the way, him and I met for the first time in the lobby today, and we were talking about your experience in Iran. And I think what hit me first, before I get to your question, is he's from Iran, right? We've got to remember that we're not against the Iranian people. There's millions upon millions in that country that we would stand with to overthrow their government. And many have moved here and are speaking about these threats. So having you here is symbolic, I think, and important and part of this conversation that we keep front and center. So the question that was submitted is, as a guest on the Freedom Talk podcast, you set forth your conviction that what happened in Iran must never happen in Texas or anywhere in the United States regarding the encroachment of Sharia law in the context of, for example, Epic City. You were running for Congress. Tell us how would you plan to prevent what happened in Iran in our state of Texas, as well as the nation? And the other part of this question that was submitted is, tell us about your concern about mosques being built in Texas. Who's behind them, and what are the concerns that people should be aware of?
Thank you, Paul, and it was great meeting you earlier today. I ran for Congress on a whim on the last day of filing, December 8th, and it wasn't a good time for me to run for office. I was trying to start a business, but what really, it was an emotional decision. What really made me want to run was three reasons. One, my father had just died a couple years before, and all the things that he was telling me about this Islamist, I was seeing it come true. Two, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. In my opinion, if they try to silence one Charlie Kirk, there needs to be 100 more Charlie Kirks. And one of the most beautiful things that Charlie Kirk said is that Islam is the sword that Democrats are going to try to cut off our necks with, and he was 100% right. And then the other one is, I joke that I've been a refugee twice in my life, once from Iran and once from California, but I've really been a refugee 3 times because I escaped Afghanistan. Also, I lived in New York for 9 years, and during COVID, I escaped, because the tyranny I was seeing during COVID, it was like from the Islamic playbook. During the Iran-Iraq war, if you didn't wear a hijab, it was forced upon you, and it was forced upon you. They said, well, if you didn't wear your hijab, you're not a patriot because we're at war with Iraq. I don't know what that had to do with anything. But the masks and the vaccination was the same exact playbook, and it really bothered me. But then when I saw Mamdani run for office, and I saw that disgusting fake smile, every Iranian, when they look at Mamdani, they see Ayatollah Khomeini. And when they see him, and we all have PTSD. When I saw that, I was like, I gotta go speak, and I gotta go make a difference. And this Islamification, Iranians, I grew up my entire life. I said I was born a Muslim, but my entire life I've hated Islam. Everybody in my family has hated Islam. We just never talk about it because we've all been intimidated. We want to live a peaceful life. We want to do business, and nobody wants to talk about it. But now, when all this stuff is happening after 47 years, all of us have PTSD, and they call us Islamophobe, but it's like Islamic trauma. We have this crazy trauma that we have from Islam, and this isn't a war that started 47 years ago. This is a war that started 1,400 years ago. We've been fighting this battle against these crazy Islamists for 1,400 years, and what we need to pay attention to is they finally destroyed Iran, not when Iran was at its weakest, when Iran was at its strongest. Iran in 1978 had the 9th largest economy in the world, the 5th largest military in the world. Iran had everything. And that's when they destroyed Iran. And they didn't do it with bombs and weapons. They did it from inside. And This is the same playbook that's happening here. They're not going to beat the United States militarily. They're going to beat the United States between the Muslim Brotherhood and China and all the evil people. They're going to beat the United States with a Trojan horse from inside. And I see this stuff playing out. And I got so many people right now. People are messaging me from Iran. I have a little bit of platform since I ran for Congress. And people are like, do something. People are getting executed. And what the answer I tell them, and it's sad that I have to give them this answer, is when you're on a plane and they tell you the plane's about to crash, they tell you put on your face, your own mask first before you help the person next to you. Right. We got to save Texas. We got to save this community because this is happening here. I can't go help Iran if I can't help my own community. This is like Islam. Islam is coming here and they don't have good intentions. And if you don't believe it, go talk to Lebanese, go talk to Iranians, go talk to people that have seen this playbook. They destroyed Iran when it was at its strongest point. Iran was powerful and they destroyed it from within. That same playbook we're seeing, I mean, I recognize patterns, I see patterns, the same patterns. Everything is exactly the way they did in Iran. Look, who would have thought 50 million people would go to Europe and Europe would be gone? Like, the population of Islamists or Muslims in Europe is 5%. 5% of the people have strong on the other 95%. We're at 2% Islamists or Muslims in the US. We get to 5 or 6%, it's over. And Texas is the battlefront. So that's why I ran for Congress. I don't care if I became a congressman or not, but I'm gonna stay in this fight because the United States, Christianity has done a lot for me, giving me a home, giving me a second chance at life. And the least I can do is wake people up because it's coming here. I promise you it's coming here.
Next question I'd like to direct to Rabbi Waliki. We were talking, Rabbi, a little while ago in the reception. Now, I mentioned about how I greatly appreciated that your work is parallel to mine as a geopolitical research, and you were a Middle Eastern expert, Middle East, but you also have a biblical worldview, a Judean-Christian biblical worldview in which you look things through the lenses of what's going on in the world today. So I'd like to ask you this, and looking at the regime in Iran, we have to really understand the ideological basis of this regime. This is a regime that has a belief with the Sharia, in the context of their belief that there is going to be a Mahdi, this messianic deliverer that will come. And the idea that they will look at a time coming to the end of the age where they are going to triumph over the world, and with this, driven by this ideology, and we saw traces of that during the Iranian Revolution in 1979, that this particular belief there with that was going on. But now we see also this regime. In your opinion, do you think that this regime will fight to the very end, radically believing that they're going to fight to the death because the basis for their belief in Mahdi and that they are going to conquer the world? Could you shed some light on that for us, Rabbi?
Thank you. That's a great question. Let's first flesh out that belief system. I'm sure everyone here knows that there are different types of Muslims. There are Sunni Muslims, there are Shiite Muslims, there are also Ibadi Muslims, which maybe I've never heard of, but that's a group that's mostly centered in Oman. There's different types of Muslims. And even within Shiite Islam, there are more moderate Shiite Muslims. The country of Azerbaijan is a Shiite majority country, but they're not out to bring the apocalypse to the world. They're more moderate Shiite Muslims. And then you have the 12 Shiite Muslims who believe in the Mahdi, who believe in the 12th Imam, who went into hiding in the 8th century, and he's going to return at some point. And what brings him back is bringing the world to the point of apocalypse, bringing bringing chaos and destruction to the world is what brings the Mahdi back. It's different than what Sunni Islam is trying to do. It's different than the Muslim Brotherhood. They have a different playbook. So the Muslim Brotherhood playbook emphasizes jihad and emphasizes political takeover. That's what they want. So their playbook is to come in and set up things like Epic City and set up mosques and schools. That's not what the 12 Shiites are interested in. They're interested in sowing chaos. So they have a terror network that includes bases of operation for drug and human trafficking in Paraguay and Venezuela. And they're interested in sowing chaos and destruction all over the world. And they believe that this is what will bring the apocalypse. And it's a very important talking point to be aware of this, because one of the pushbacks that we often get when we say Iran can't have a nuclear weapon is people will say, well, Pakistan is a Muslim country. They have a nuclear weapon, and that's not a threat to the world. I mean, North Korea is a pretty awful dictatorship, and they're evil people, and they have a nuclear weapon, and that's not it's not good, but it doesn't, they're not about to blow up the world. That's true. Neither Pakistan, which is a Sunni government, nor North Korea, which is a secular, I don't know what that ideology is, just insane dictatorship. Neither of them has an ideological, like a religious belief that it is their mission to bring maximum destruction on planet Earth in order to bring their Messiah figure back. 12 Shiite Islam does. So when President Trump says if they had a nuclear weapon, they would use it, you hear him say it all the time. President Trump was probably educated to some extent about this ideology. I imagine he's been briefed on it, and it's true. This is literally what they believe is the way to bring, if you're Christian and you believe that, winning souls for Jesus is the way to bring perfection to the world, or if you're Jewish and you believe that our goal is that the entire world have faith in the God of Israel, the God of the Bible. Not that everyone has to be Jewish, that's not our goal. Our goal is for everyone to have faith in the God of the Bible. Their goal is to bring apocalypse upon the world, which then summons the Mahdi back. That said, to really answer your question, I don't believe that they are suicidal. I believe they're much more shrewd than that. But what I do believe is that they do not care how much destruction is brought upon their country, so long as when the dust settles, they are still in power. Even if President Trump can declare that we've destroyed their nuclear program, and even if we get this 60% enriched uranium out, and even as long as they remain in power, when the dust settles, as long as they're not removed from power, keep their heads down till the end of the Trump administration. There will never be another Donald Trump, and they know that no matter who comes after it, the conviction to attack them that Donald Trump has shown probably won't be there no matter who's in office. That's how they think. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm saying this is what they think. They figure if they could survive this, then they don't care how many bridges and how many power plants and how many petrochemical plants and how many army bases are destroyed and how much their navy's at the bottom of the sea. And every time I hear President Trump talk about how much destruction we've wreaked on their military, they don't care. They care. They don't want it destroyed, but that doesn't shake them. What shakes them is what could bring down the regime. What they fear most is their own people. Notice that in this last round, since all the shootings started again over the course of the last few weeks, you notice that the Iranians have been attacking Iraq and Jordan and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait and Bahrain. Who have they not attacked? Israel. The Houthis. Houthis are attacking Saudi Arabia. The Houthis are not attacking Israel. How come no one's attacking Israel right now? Because for the last 3 weeks of the first round of fighting, the first 40 days, from February 28th to April 8th, that first 40 days of fighting, during the last 3 weeks of it, Israel pivoted. The United States started focusing on the Strait of Hormuz, and Israel pivoted and started striking IRGC and Basij checkpoints and bases. They were weakening the tools that the regime uses to actually hold power over its people. So long as they have their stormtroopers in the streets, they don't care how many bridges we destroy. President Trump thinks that if he destroys another bridge, they might cry uncle. Not at all. We have to destroy the IRGC bases, empower the people. The Israeli defense minister, towards the end of that first round of fighting, made an announcement. You know, when politicians make announcements, you have to ask yourself, why are they telling me this? The event is the announcement. You have to say, why do I know this? And the defense minister of Israel, Israel Katz, said that when the time comes for the Iranian people to come back out into the streets, the Israelis will be hovering overhead with drones and helicopters, providing air cover for the protest. Now, wait, don't applaud. Because Israel's hands then got tied. And Israel's no longer in the picture, and is being told to sit it out. And no one's providing that air cover for the people. With all due respect to our wonderful president, and I applaud every airstrike. Go ahead and destroy their bridges and their power plants. Fine. It's not going to bring down the regime. This regime is crazy. And they believe in the Mahdi. And they want to destroy the world. But their number one agenda item right now is to make sure that the Iranian people do not rise up. They don't care how much other destruction. So if we think that one more bridge, one more power plant, one more army installation, brag all you want about their navy being at the bottom of the sea, none of that matters.
Thank you.
Rabbi, I've got the next question for you, and I first want to say that this is the first time you and I've met in person, so it's an honor. But I've seen you on TV before I even knew you were going to be here tonight. I watch YouTube occasionally and watch some of the commentary. This gentleman is all over the place. In fact, he was just on like an hour before I was driving here in a hotel room. There was like fog coming out of the shower. He got on the podcast, but just, remarkable in the knowledge that he shares, and it's great. So next question, sir, is here for you as well. So anticipating the collapse of the Iranian regime, their proxies, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, no doubt will continue their activities within their axis of terror. How do you see the future going forward in the Middle East? And won't these proxies attempt to regroup and reassert their power through continued attacks upon Israel and the U.S. allies of the free world?
Well, first of all, thank you for the plug for all the work that I do on YouTube. If you don't watch me on YouTube, you heard it right here. I did not pay him for that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So first of all, your question is very optimistic, because your question assumes that the regime is going to fall. And regime change has become a dirty word in this country. Everyone's afraid to say it. President Trump, Secretary of State Rubio, every time they're asked about it, they say, no, that's not our goal. That's not our goal. Our goal isn't regime change. It's like as though their goal is everything but. So let me first comment on that, and then we'll talk about what things will look like. Because I've thought about this particular question a lot. That even when the regime falls, you still have this massive international network, all these proxies that I described in South America. South America is a major base for Hezbollah, by the way. Hezbollah is not just Lebanon and Iraq, all over South America. Let's first talk about that regime change issue, regime fall. Oh, we don't want a regime change war. We don't. It's true. We don't want what we did in Iraq. We don't want that type of chaos. We don't want to, some people will say, some of you may have seen me over the years appearing on Steve Bannon's show. Anyone here see me on War? Yeah. A few minutes ago. I consider it a duty. If it's not me, there's no one there pleading my case. Whatever you think of Steve. But, and he's fond of saying, well, what do you mean? If we bring down the regime, you break it, you bought it. And I would say, no, it's not true. It doesn't have to be the goal, but President Trump is, I think, learning slowly. He's almost there. Maybe he realizes it already, that the only way to achieve the objectives that he has set out is to bring down the regime. Not that regime change is the end goal. I mean, for Israel it is, honestly. For Israel, we do need the regime to go away. If America's goals are no nuclear program, no funding for proxies, no ballistic missile program, right? Straits are open. These are the goals that President Trump set out. and to destroy their navy. There were 4 on the first day of the war, and then he added in the Straits of Hormuz when they got closed. Those are the objectives of America. Like I said before, bombing the next bridge or the next drone factory or the next launch site is not going to stop the funding for the proxies. It's not going to end the nuclear program. It's not going to open the Straits of Hormuz. If you arm the Iranian people, if you provide air cover for them, if you call them out into the streets and provide that air cover, if you bomb IRGC checkpoints, that's far more. Bombing an IRGC checkpoint where there's 6 or 10 besieged guys and scaring them will cause defections that will be far more damaging to the Iranian regime than bombing a power plant or a bridge. Honestly, I don't mind him bombing all these things, but it's not accomplishing the goal. The only way to achieve those objectives is to bring down the regime. It's a means, it's not the goal, it's the means. Now, once the regime falls, to answer your question, Paul, what happens next to that whole network? What happens to Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hezbollah in Iraq and the whole network in Venezuela and Paraguay? What happens to all of them? Well, they're far less dangerous because of what happens in Iran. Iran is not just another Middle Eastern country. As you laid out what a powerful country it was. If you look at a map, add up Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, all those countries together, and Iraq, throw that into, the landmass and populations of all those countries combined are not even close to Iran. That's how big Iran is. Look on a map and look how big it is. It's a massive, educated population. It will become, and it has oil, it will become a superpower quickly. And it will become a pro-Western superpower quickly. Will there then be a network of the remnants of the old regime around the world with whatever revenue streams they have without the oil from Iran? Yes. We're not going to end all terrorism in the world when the Iranian regime falls. But that's what it'll be relegated to. It'll become, kind of on a global scale, guerrilla warfare rather than a superpower of terrorism. So will the problem of the network be solved? No. But it will atrophy, and it will be weaker, and it will be easier to combat.
Thank you, sir. One follow-up, if I may, because I give myself the privilege up here to ask this follow-up question. It's on a lot of our minds. If you were a betting person, is the Ayatollah alive?
It's interesting you asked that question. I'm a columnist for the Jerusalem Post, in addition to the other things that I do. And I wrote my last column in the Jerusalem Post, which appeared last week. I suggested 5 steps that the Americans can take that will destabilize the regime that do not require a single boot on the ground. Easy things that the United States can do that do not require a boot on the ground. And the first item on my list in that column, you can look it up on the Jerusalem Post. If you go to jpost.com and just type in my name, I'm the only person named Paisach Wolaki, easy to find. And you'll get to my author page and you'll find the piece right there. And I list 5 things that America could do. And it would bring down the regime and no loss of life. You don't have to destroy anything else. The first item on my list was that the United States of America should make a public demand of the regime that they show verifiable proof of life and functionality of Moshtaba Khamenei. Why? Let me explain the logic behind it. Because you might think to yourself, well, what do we care? We care if he's actually alive or not. You have to think about victory in terms of what your enemy considers defeat. Okay? And that's the big mistake we make. Stop bragging about how much we've destroyed their military. They don't care. Who cares? That's not how they're keeping score. It's irrelevant. But all you have to do, and it's just a statement, it's a tweet. President Trump should just say, we demand proof of life and functionality, or we're not going to talk to anybody. No mediators, we're not talking to Qatar or Pakistan or Turkey or anybody about Iran until we see that. Why? The logic is simple. You keep telling us that no matter what we negotiate with you and no matter what you decide, the real decision maker is Moshtaba Khamenei, the Ayatollah, and you got to go back to him and get his okay. So we don't know who we're negotiating with. We've never seen the guy. And we're not so sure he's making the decisions. Prove that he's alive. Now, why do I say to do this? Because again, on our side, we don't really care, right? We do care. You know why? Because they can't. And when they can't prove that he might still be alive. Israeli intelligence officers that I know say that he is alive but not functioning as a leader, whatever. When they can't produce it, because it's on the world stage that they've said this, the Iranian people have ways of finding out what's being said. They are somewhat connected. The word gets through. The public world, the global embarrassment, the shame on the regime when they can't fulfill that demand and they're trying to wiggle out of it will cause so many doubts in the mind of Iranians about whether he's actually alive that will do more to destabilize the regime and potentially bring the people out into the streets than bombing any bridge or any power plant. Just putting out that tweet. Because this regime survives on fear and on intimidation. And they are struggling to hold the unity at the top together. And at the top of the regime, after the Ayatollah, there's these factions. It's like mafia families. And the only thing that's keeping them from turning their guns at each other or betraying each other is that they're holding it together under the banner of Khamenei is the Ayatollah. Because if he's dead, then who gets to inherit him? And then the infighting starts and the whole thing destabilizes. It's like the knot that if you cut it, the whole thing falls apart. So America should demand proof of life, proof of functionality of Mojtaba Khamenei, and then just sit back and watch the chaos unravel.
Thank you. Well said, sir.
I'd add to that the Ayatollah might probably have some parallel, what do you say, aspirations like Mitch McConnell there. Rumors about him being propped up, on social media. Maybe there's the same thing.
President Trump said that he's 10% alive. Is what
Yeah, 10% alive. I like that.
What are the other 4 steps?
I'd like to direct.
I'm not giving a 45-minute lecture here tonight. You can go to JPost, type in jpost.com, and you can just type my first name. That'll be enough probably, or my last name, Wolicki, Wolicki, and my author page will come up. It's the most recent column on my author page. Go ahead and read it. I'm not going to go through all 5. It won't be fair to the rest of the panel.
I hope Trump read it.
Right, I'd like to direct this next question to Mr. Kirby Wilbur. I got acquainted with Mr. Wilbur tonight. Heard about his grand exodus from the state of Washington just in time to make it to Texas, the great Lone Star State. He is quite a storyteller and has been involved extensively with media, radio, television. And I'd like to direct this question to you, Mr. Wilbur. Most of the American population really fails to fully understand the threat that Iran poses, with the exception of course, the people in this room. And regarding Iran's threat to our national security, and as a leading global terrorist network, in your opinion, has the messaging from the current administration been effective enough in informing the public of the reality of the existential threat posed by Iran? And what would you see that we need going forward as far as putting the message out? Because as one has been involved a number of years in media, could you address that, sir?
Thank you very much. Is this on? Yeah, okay, got it. A radio guy should know when the microphone's on. First of all, thank you for letting me be part of this panel. My answer is no. We've not done enough, not gotten the message out. And not to be critical of our president, because I think finally he has the courage to stand up and do something. Building on what the rabbi has talked about, the Mahdi, the people in charge of Iran, don't think like we do. I think sometimes we have what I call Western mental imperialism. We think everyone thinks like we do. It happened with the communists. We said peaceful coexistence. Oh, let's all get together and have a picnic and love one another. They thought, no, we just want peace so we can build up to kill you. And when we talk about love and peace and other things, they mean something totally different. And when we talk about memorandum of understanding, they say, no, this is a ceasefire, let me rebuild and let us resupply. And I think the president publicly has shown some naivety about the Iranians. He's very transactional. The making of the deal, right? I want a deal. I want to deal with the 5 elements. Keeping the straits open, no ballistic missile program. No, the answer is exactly as both these gentlemen have said, total replacement of the regime. That is the only answer we can have. And this is our opportunity, because these people will never quit. They're driven by this messianic idea that their divine mission is to bring about the Mahdi and bring about the end of the world. They will not stop in that. It is, as the rabbi mentioned, the same thing for Christians and Jews. We have a certain faith that drives us, so do they. And we must understand that faith. They will do whatever it takes. And the president, I think, in ratcheting up the bombing for 12 or 14 days, then, okay, let's talk. It's a big mistake. It's what the Ayatollahs are doing. They're resupplying, rebuilding, repairing, getting enough just to get through the day. When the president's told the Russians and the Chinese aren't supplying the Iranians, anyone in this room, raise your hand if you really believe the Russians and the Chinese are not supplying the Iranians. Now, he may be saying to be diplomatic, but it's the message to the American people that's important. And I think at the very beginning, the strategic importance of what we're doing, the closeness of them having a bomb, what their religion dictates they do, had to be stressed to the American people. This is not just another regime we're dealing with, a regime we have a difference of opinion with. It is a regime that is committed on a divine mission, and they will do whatever it takes. And as Rabbi said, they don't care about people. They didn't care about people when they overthrew the Shah. They want power, and they want to fulfill their mission. So I think the president and the administration in communication has messed that up. And we all know from our history, if you study history, I'm a history teacher sometimes, and I always tell my students, the only thing we learn from history is no one ever learns from history. And it's very important, they don't. And we know from Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, the American people have very short attention span, very little patience. They're willing to go to war, but they want to win.
Right.
They don't want a long, protracted conflict. And you know who else knows that? The Iranian regime knows that. And so if they can play the game and placate the president with some words and buy time, they know the midterms are coming. They know gas is too high. They know inflation is up. And they know the domestic pressures on an American president. Because it's in the media every day, and they read the papers. So I think there's been a serious mistake in how we message this and in the conduct of the war. We never should have told the Israelis sit on the sideline. We should have been working with them to end this, because once it ends, then the Democrats, the liberals, and the leftists, and the Muslims, and the Marxists, and the DSA won't have an issue to drag before the American people. It will be a success if it's done right, that the president can say, look, we did this, we're successful, terrorism has taken a blow, the Iranian people will be freed. To drag it out, to go the gradualist approach like we did in Vietnam and elsewhere, is simply going to end in failure. And I hope the president somewhere is learning that this isn't, let's make a deal. This is serious regime change. The Israelis are committed. We should be committed. And together, I think we can achieve that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So Kirby, keeping your political hat and your radio hat on, you ran a statewide political party, messaging. You've got a picture in your house with you and Reagan. I mean, you look at the history of what you know, and history often repeats itself. Let's read out this next question in that context. So the president is clearly frustrated with Iran's lies and their unwillingness to abide by the terms of any agreement. It has some. So Trump is realizing that there is no one in Iran with a voice of reason that he can make a deal with to resolve the conflict in the Strait and to have them refrain from the use of nuclear weapon technology. What could this administration do differently in dealing with Iran, and what obstacles does it face?
I think Rabbi's idea is great, by the way. Publicly call them to produce proof of life of their leader. because he obviously, I believe it's true, he's not functional, and we need to call them on that. I also think the president needs to get our allies together, UAE, I question Qatar, but Saudi Arabia, some of the others, say, look, we're going for it. You gotta understand, these countries look at us in the past and say, well, you know, there are a lot of Vietnamese had to flee, a lot of Afghans had to flee, because America commits and then never follows through. We've got to assure them that we're gonna follow through. If they work with us, we're gonna work with the Israelis, and Iran is gone. Because those nations don't trust Iran, they fear Iran, but if they bet on a losing horse, like bet on us, and we lose, they're gonna pay. The Iranians will exercise retribution. So we gotta call our allies together, say we're going for it. Then we have to have maximum military pressure. We have to work with the Israelis on destroying the infrastructure, the governmental infrastructure, so that when the people do rebel, they see they have a chance. Remember what the president very early on said to the Iranian people, the cavalry's coming. 30,000 dead Iranians later, the cavalry wasn't there, and the people said, oh my God, he said they were coming, they didn't come, how can we trust them?
Right.
We've got to reinstill that trust, because the answer ultimately is the Iranian people.
Right.
We could put all sorts of troops on the ground, we could kill them all, we could devastate the military, but we're not going to be there occupying. It's not our job, it's the job of the Iranian people who are under tyranny, they've suffered, they're looking for relief, and we promised it, but didn't deliver it. So get together with the allies, assure the Iranian people are real, work with the Israelis, because they have an obviously superior intelligence network, and they have the ability to assist us. We can do certain things, they can do certain things. And tell the Ayatollahs, it's over. We're coming for you, and the Iranian people will be free and have a voice. And that message has to get across. We have to convince the American people, we're serious. This is not, oh, we're gonna cut a deal, and we're gonna get the straits open, and they're gonna stay in power. And 3 years from now, we're gonna have the same problem.
Right.
Except they're better at building nuclear weapons. They're hidden, they've learned from this, and they're gonna be more of a threat to us if we don't end it now.
All right, I'd like to direct this question to Dr. Paul Chabot. By the way, Dr. Chabot, amazing work you've done, Fox News, and the interviews that you have dealing with your background as far as military intelligence and your years of experience have been amazing. I would like to ask you the question based on your experience in military intelligence and your service in Iraq. What would you say is the single biggest misunderstanding that Americans have about modern warfare in the Middle East?
That it's not conventional. It's not something we're really used to. So let me go back just a little bit on this. When I was in Iraq during 2008, what a wake-up call. But what we realized, and there was a terms that we hear in the military, putting warheads on foreheads or cutting grass. And I said, what do you mean cutting grass? I worked with our Joint Special Operations at the time as an intel officer. And the teams would go out every night and come back early morning hours. And you have a bunch of detainees and you're interviewing them and you're getting all this intel, and that leads to the next target and the next target and the next target. And the term cutting grass means that we would wipe out all of these so-called leaders of cells, but new ones just continue to regenerate all over the place. And so we often think if we just take out the head of a snake, the body's going to die. It's not. I wrote down some pretty stark numbers. When you think about history, Germany, in 1939, Germany was already active in their plan. Do you know that 96% of the American people did not want to get involved in a war with Germany at that time?
Yes.
Fast forward to June of 1941, active combat. Only 21% of our nation was willing to go to war. After Pearl Harbor, 98% were willing to go to war. When we think about this not being conventional, what we have to think about is we're not dealing with a country. You're dealing with an ideology, and it is very simple. And I wish I would have realized this when I was in Iraq, but it's this. There is good and there is evil. And the best way I can describe it, my doctoral dissertation was on resiliency of terror networks. I want you to think of it this way. If you've ever been to a horror movie, and at the end of the movie, the good guy or the good lady always has the monster on the ground, right? Cut up in pieces. Over here, right? The credits are just about to roll, and the lady that just killed the monster is walking away. What happens with that monster? Almost every time in the movie, it comes right back up. As a nation, as Americans, what we have to realize is this isn't instant gratification. This is an eternal battle against evil. And what that means is we can never take our eye off the adversary, even when it's weak, because it will rise. Which is why we can never be an isolationist nation, which is why we must have a strong military presence across this globe, because the world depends on us. If the United States was in the Middle East, think about that for a minute. Every single one of our boys and girls would be ready to gear up to go forward to fight. The only thing standing in the real world of difference today is Israel. We have an ally, we have timing, we have the perseverance. But my only prayer to the American public is that we understand that we may never see victory because we're never going to eliminate evil. But our time here on earth, as long as our heart is still beating, it means we always stay on target and we never let those credits roll on that film.
Paul, may I add something to what you said?
Yes,
if I
sir.
may?
Yes, sir.
The word evil. We are involved in a war that goes beyond Iran. It goes beyond other places of conflict. It's what Douglas Murray calls the war against the West. Judeo-Christian values, Western civilization under attack by Marxists, by Islamists, by others, and they're united against us. And it's a war that never ends unless the destruction of Western civilization. That's how the war ends, because all these people against us, Judeo-Christian values, what we believe in. It's evil, and we don't use that word a lot. I talked to a chaplain who served in Iraq, who told me that his biggest issue with young soldiers was the idea of evil, because they had been taught there is no evil, that everything is subjective, not objective. A wise man once said, "Make no peace with evil." And it's great wisdom for us to remember. We're dealing with evil people. The struggle will never end. We just have to do what we can in our time to pursue it and to win. But it will never be over. Our children, their children, our posterity will be fighting the same battle. Maybe not against the Islamists, maybe not against the Marxists, but they'll be fighting this battle because there are people out to destroy what we have. And Israel and the United States are the two outstanding examples of remaining Judeo-Christian values. We must defend them, we must fight for them, and we must win.
Thanks, sir. Well said. All right, this question is from my new good friend, Dr. Mark Fulmer, and I first want to take a minute to acknowledge all the work that he has done with Benji and his wife and the team and this panel in putting this work together, an immense amount of work. He took the ball with Benji and built this entire framework, so thank you. Let's give him a big round for all the work you did. Y'all appreciate it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say Benji and his wife, where they at in the corners, always, everything you guys have been doing. God bless you guys. Mark, there's been a great deal of discussion regarding India's geopolitical role in the Middle East, especially in the context of the Iran conflict. Do you see a future where India's expanded role in the Middle East that could prove beneficial to keeping stability in the region And how so?
Yeah. India is probably the most under-evaluated, underappreciated dynamic in the geopolitical realm. Now, they would not necessarily be involved directly with war in Iran, but because of the fact that the nation of India is part of what we call IMEC, IMEC, that's the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. IMEC actually stands in opposition to another global initiative, Communist China's Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative by Communist China is an elaborate plan to gain access to nations all over the world, giving them a back door into everything from natural resources to wealth to industry, and to position themselves actually to steal military secrets. So IMEC actually stands in opposition to what the Belt and Road Initiative stands for, because we do know, as it was mentioned earlier, that it is no surprise that China, Russia are supporting Iran. They're supporting the regime in Iran. So the best way to counteract that, India has one of the largest standing militaries in the world. But not only that, they understand the ideological threat of Islamic terrorism in their own nation. They've sustained some very horrific terrorist attacks in India. So with that, there's a relationship that the Prime Minister of India recently has been in the Israeli Knesset and talking with Netanyahu and saying what both nations can do to exchange resources, planning, to better position and make the stability add to the Middle East. So I'm very optimistic about India because they do share some of the same common enemies that we do, United States and Israel. And I see them as a player on the field that is we're probably going to hear more and more about. And they stand a great deal to offer for us in this geopolitical context.
May I mention something along that line? If you study the history of India, Islam invaded India roughly 850 to 900 AD. And they had a 300 or 400 year conquest of India. In fact, India has one of the largest Muslim populations in the world. Pakistan and India were separated. Pakistan was supposed to be all Muslim, India all Hindu, but they all didn't cross the border, and there are a large number of Muslims. Will Durant, the famous historian of India, we've read, he wrote a 12-volume history of the world. Quote, the Islamic invasion of India was the bloodiest event in world history. Quote, they slaughtered millions because the Indians, being Hindu and other religions, were relatively peaceful people, and the Muslims in 800 weren't any more peaceful than some of them are today. And there's a history there that I think, given the ties of India to British values and Western values, and the role they can play, they can be an incredible counterweight and assistance to us in this based on their history. They remember, trust me, the bloodiest event in world history was the Islamic invasion of India. And they remember.
And if I may add to that, he's 100% right. I think Pakistan has 290 million Muslims. India has close to that also. And India is also scared of the Muslim populations. And one of the things I think that's important is that, President Trump, I think deep down understands that he needs regime change in Iran. Not having regime change is such a disaster because if the regime survives, they're going to be even more brutal and they're going to go after the people. And the people, you've never had a population of 93, 94 million people, nationalistic, very proud, patriotic people who are begging the outside to help bomb them. They start getting nervous when the bombing stops. They're willing to die because dying is better than their kids being tortured, their daughters being raped, their uterus removed. They feel like, please kill us if you're going to kill the mullahs too. And you know, one of the people that is running the Islamic Republic right now that they consider moderate, in Farsi interview came out and said on their TV that when they did October 7th, they expected to get nuked by Israel. Imagine the mindset. I mean, we have a huge misunderstanding of just how brutal and crazy these people are. They did October 7th fully expecting to get Israel to nuke them. They don't care about 93, 94 million population. In fact, they prefer to starve them and have them die and be miserable. All they care about is, I mean, think about them, you know, the Taliban running Afghanistan. They're just like the Taliban running a country that's got 75 to 100 trillion dollars worth of wealth. All they care about is the natural resources of Iran. They're willing to have all the people in Iran die as long as they control those resources so they could build bombs and nuke Israel. That's their entire, and the rabbi's right, they're smarter than we think they are. They are crazy death cult, but there's a calculation behind them, and their entire whole thing is that they know everything in the West, they know how we think, they know how our thought process goes, and their whole game is just to wait this out. And if they wait President Trump out, and I think President Trump understands that, when he's saying, we don't want regime change, or may hint at that, it's because he knows there's a lot of powerful forces like China and Russia that are calling all the shots. Right now, the Islamic Republic is in the shambles. They don't really have leadership. The shots are being called by China. They're just a proxy. We're at war with China right now, except we're at war with their proxy, which is the Islamic Republic. China's calling all the shots. China's selling them all the weapons. These people, as crazy and as brutal they are, they can't be that crazy. They have some support. There's somebody behind them, and that somebody's China. China's telling them, they're calling all the shots, they're telling them what to do, and President Trump is playing this carefully because he doesn't want to end up in a nuclear war with China. So, there's a lot of powerful forces that have been raping Iran's natural resources, and that's what this is all about. They put a bunch of crazies in power so they could keep, taking all the oil, take all the gas, take all their resources. And the European powers have been feasting at Iran's misery, at the people's misery. That's why President Trump summoned King Charles here. He hadn't been here since 1991. Pulled him aside, said, "You better get rid of Starmer. You better act right, or you guys are in trouble." And they did. But the Europeans are all feasting off the Iranians. The neighbors, Pakistan is feasting off of them. Turkey is making money off of them. Qatar is stealing all the gas. There's a gas reserve in the south of Iran called the South Pars. It's under the Persian Gulf. 90% of it is owned by Iran. 10% of it was owned by Qatar, but all the money is made on the Qatar side. Something like $10 trillion has been stolen from Qatar. And then Qatar takes that money, buys all university, buys Tucker Carlson, buys, builds a mosque here. This is all from stolen money. This is stolen money from Iran. And they understand that if there is a free Iran, if there's regime change, the gravy train's over. That's why they're giving us free 747s. That's why they're investing. That's why they're buying our politicians. Qatar stands to lose more than any other country if there's regime change, and they will fight us tooth and nail and will not allow us. So there's a lot of outside forces. I think people need to know that President Trump understands that there needs to be regime change, but there are powerful forces within his own administration, within people that we think are allies that do not want him to have regime change. And the people of Iran, they don't trust America as much as they trust Israel. They know the Israelis get it. Americans don't always get it. We don't always get it. The Israelis 100% get it.
Great, thank you.
Can I add in, I want to pick up on this point about India, but first let me mention about China and Pakistan. I'm so happy you brought up how we're actually at war with China. A lot of people don't realize that China was also very involved with Hamas, with the building of the tunnel network, both there and the tunnel network in Lebanon. A lot of it was Chinese technology, and there were Chinese engineers who were actually found in the Gaza Strip. Once the war started, and they were kind of like they had been there, they were working on the tunnel network. The Chinese are behind all of this. That's certainly true. I've written about it a number of times since October 7th. A piece in Newsweek at one point about how China's been behind all of this. But specifically for right now, and this, you asked me to give the other 4 suggestions I made in that Jerusalem Post piece. One of them, these are all things, like I said, they're all things that could destabilize the regime without putting a single boot on the ground. It doesn't even involve bombing anything. One of them is, President Trump is very fond of saying that we have this blockade, and it's a hermetic blockade, not a single ship is getting through, and that's very nice. But shipping is not the only way that things get into Iran. After the blockade was put in place, which is after the ceasefire on April 8th, remember Trump said, oh, blockading Iran all over Iran's ports. Pakistan opened up in May this year, early May. Pakistan opened up 6 overland trade routes, shipping routes, because Pakistan borders Iran. From Pakistan into Iran, Pakistan on the other side borders China. And there were thousands of shipping containers of material, weapons, other materials that were sitting in Pakistan coming from China. They opened up these trade routes and they started bringing goods in. So as much as we like to say that there's this blockade and it's hermetic, it's not hermetic. The Pakistanis are actively working to break the blockade. And if you just Google this, just Google like blockade, Iran, Pakistan, trade routes, or something like that, and you'll find articles about this. This is public information. If I know it, President Trump knows it. Okay? So one of my suggestions was that the United States should publicly call on Pakistan to stop undermining the blockade and close those trade routes, and call them out. Pakistan's not our friend. And why is Pakistan connected to China? Pakistan's basically owned by China. The Pakistani foreign minister said recently in Arabic in the parliament in Pakistan that throughout the entire negotiation for the ceasefire, where Pakistan was the big mediator, remember?
Yes.
That everything that he did and every move they made was coordinated with Wang Yi, the foreign minister of the Chinese Communist Party. He said that publicly, that everything that they did throughout that entire process was coordinated with the Chinese Communist Party, which means that the mediator wasn't Pakistan, it was the Chinese Communist Party. They're behind all of this. Now on to the point about India. And here, I'm the foreigner in the room here. I live in Israel. I landed from Israel yesterday in Texas. So this is gonna, I wanna share a piece of advice for patriotic Americans who are concerned about what Kirby is raising about the takeover, the battle that we're fighting, the takeover by the Red Green Alliance. I have good friends in New York who are in the leadership of the anti-Mamdani coalition that is building. And if you've seen any news items about anti-Mamdani protests by people on our side, a lot of that is organized by a coalition of people. There are Christians, there are Jews, there are a lot of different groups that are involved in it. And they have begun working very closely with the Hindu community in New York. The Hindu community is the great untapped resource in conservative politics in America. Hindus are very politically conservative people. They have strong family values. They know way better than we do how dangerous Islam is. They know it really well. You start talking to Hindus about Islam, they're all, they're very reserved people and they don't like to, cause a fuss. But once you get them talking about Islam, they know. And they're an untapped resource. And yes, their religion is not a biblical religion, and sometimes for us, Jews and Christians, we're like, oh, do I really want to work with them? Get over it. Okay? These are our allies. And we need to find anyone here, and this is a room full of activists, it's a room full of leaders. Get in touch with Hindu leaders locally. Let's start working together with them. They are an industrious population. They share a lot of our values, and they understand the threat of Islam. And start building coalitions. Bring the Hindus into our coalition. They are an untapped resource in this country.
Thank you.
And the rape and destruction and paying jizya, all of that happened in India. And the 300 million population of Muslims that are in India, the Hindus know more about the threat, but they just don't talk about it because they're not very confrontational. But both Khomeini's family and Mamdani's family were Muslims that were expelled from India. They weren't expelled because they were model citizens. Just imagine what they did to be expelled from India. There's a lesson to be learned from them.
Thank you, sir. Mark,
All
with
right.
the 23 minutes I think we have left.
What we want to do is move into our audience Q&A for what time that we have remaining. So I don't know if we have the ability to display some of these questions on the monitor here, Benji. I'll just go ahead and go from my tablet here. I'll take one from the top. Some really great questions from the audience. We won't be able to cover every question, but one I would like to start with is this. It says that, and any of the speakers, any of the panelists can feel free to answer this, by the way. Has Trump told Israel to stop killing the mullahs, Iran's military, at any time? Has he made any messages to Israel to have them to really stand down? And if so, what do we see moving forward?
Let me take that as the Israeli on the panel. And the answer, sadly, is yes. Israel was, as I said, when that ceasefire went into effect on April 8th, for the final 3 weeks of that 40 days of fighting, the initial 2 weeks were really knocking out a lot of the launchers of ballistic missiles. There's a lot less launchers than there are missiles. So if you get rid of launchers, the missiles are useless. So they were destroying launchers and missile depots, and for the first 2 weeks, and then for the last 3 weeks of it, as I said before, they were going after regime targets. There were more assassinations of leadership, IRGC, besiege bases, checkpoints. We started to see defections, which we no longer see. On the contrary, there's recruitment to the IRGC. They're bringing in more Shiite militias from neighboring countries who are more willing to murder Iranian people. They've actually gotten stronger. And Israel was stopped from this mission. Israel was on the path to causing mass defections from the IRGC, which just pulls the rug out from under the regime. They have no power base anymore. Israel was on the verge of doing this. Also in the 12-day war a year ago, at the end, you might remember after the 12-day war did not end with Operation Midnight Hammer. We kind of sort of remember it that way because it happened near the end of it, but there were 2 more days. Because after Operation Midnight Hammer, Israel continued bombing, but they weren't bombing military installations. They were bombing regime targets, and they were very close to bringing down the regime. And for whatever reason, it has to do with people in the administration, it has to do with people who are our allies in the politically conservative movement, in the MAGA movement in America, who are allergic to the concept of regime change. They think it's some terrible thing because they think, for the reasons I stated before. And these pressures, and you see it whenever Trump is asked about this. He always denies that it's a goal. No, we don't want to change the regime. And Israel, and here I'm going to listen carefully to the next thing I say. Listen carefully. And I say this with knowledge. Israel has real operational plans that are in the drawer and ready to go that could bring down this regime very quickly. And they're being worked on and tweaked, and they are ready to roll. And as soon as the green light would be given, and it won't even take that long. Israel knows exactly what to do. Remember that when the assassinations of the top Iranian leadership happened in the opening days of the 12-day war and this war, a lot of those assassinations did not happen from airstrikes from airplanes. They happened from drones that were launched from within Iran. Think about that. Drones that were launched from within Iran. The Israelis are everywhere. And there are real plans. I'm telling you this, I know this from people at the top who I've spoken to. There are plans. They know exactly how it will be done. They were on the path to doing it. And that is why Iran has not fired a single missile at Israel in this whole last couple of months. And they're avoiding and poking the tiger. That's why they're doing it. So this is where we are. This is where we are right now. Israel's hands are being tied, but they won't be tied forever. And the Israelis the Israeli security establishment will not give up on this goal if it has to be alone and in defiance of America, because the United States government decides we're done, we're going home, and we're going to declare victory and the regime's still intact. This regime is going to fall.
And I understand those drones were actually even made in Iran with IRGC money.
Yes.
All right, next question here that comes from the audience is that in Iran, there is a underground church network that there are Christians who are hiding, been oppressed, and that is well documented. What do we know that is happening now, if anything, to protect such populations from this regime? And as we know that the assaults from the Iranian regime to execute individuals publicly still continues. I think there was a little bit, I think Rabbi, you had mentioned some that is being done. Can we address what is being done to protect some of these groups, especially with the the protesters, those that are speaking against it? It's not like we can arm them. I mean, wish we could, but what is being done to protect these groups?
At present, unfortunately, there is not much that's being done to protect them. That's why you're not seeing people come out into the streets. There have been reports over the last few weeks, beginning in rural areas, not in the major city centers. There has been some small armed uprisings that are happening. They're not well organized. They're not coordinated. And again, Israel's hands were tied, and for some reason, the U.S. administration is doing everything but those things that will actually destabilize the regime. I'm sad to say it. They're doing everything other than the things that will actually solve the problem. This is why you don't see the people coming out into the street. This is why you don't see the IRGC having mass defections. This is why you don't see the regime being destabilized. We think it's being destabilized because they're suffering. Now, they are being destabilized in a very slow, roundabout way. I'm not saying I give my blessing to every airstrike and every, go ahead, destroy everything, it's fine. And it's a very slow way to bring down the regime, because eventually the economy is going to implode, and the Iranian people have to eat and they have to have water, and they will at some point come out into the streets, even if they're going to die. They, as you said, they're willing to sacrifice. But this is a very roundabout, uncertain, long way, hoping for secondary and third level results of dominoes to fall to bring down the regime. It will be much more direct, much more bloodless, much quicker. Stop bombing bridges, stop bombing electrical facilities, start bombing the IRGC, start decapitating them. When President Trump put out that tweet last week where he said, for every ship that they fire on, we're going to bomb another bridge. Remember that one? And I read that and I said, I wish it had said, for every ship that they bomb, we're going to take out one of the members of Parliament. One of you is going to die. Every ship you attack, an Iranian Parliament member dies. The Israelis have all the intelligence. We could take them out. That's how you end this, and that's how you win.
All right, the next question that I have here is something we have touched on. Yeah. Thank you for your response. Is that when we were talking about the different types of Muslims, Sunni, Shia, being, I guess, from what we would say from the spectrum of the more radical to the moderate, an individual said, don't you agree that it's time we stop calling Islam a religion, but more of an ideology? So I'll just throw that out to whoever wants to tackle that one.
It's interesting. Lebanese and Iranians generally are the least, the least orthodox or the least crazy Islamist, and they're generally, party, drink, all that stuff. But for whatever reason, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the craziest is Pakistan. 98% are, believe all the craziest part of Islam that you could think of, and then you have Afghanistan And then the Indians and the Muslims in India seem to be like a lot of the death threats that I get are either from the Muslims in India or Pakistan. That's where all my death threats come from. But it's just the Gulf countries. I think they're and it's not so much it's not so much the Shia or Sunni. You have really crazy Sunnis and then really crazy Shiites. But I think that region, specifically Pakistan, 98%, 99% of Pakistan is just as far, as most radicalized as you can imagine, and followed by Afghanistan.
I
Right.
think that's a very delicate
Yeah.
question. Because once you get into religion, remember, our goal is to convince people that these things have to be done. We've got a large number of people in the middle in this country who don't know and are open to persuasion. So if you start getting into great details about religion in public, I think you're on dangerous ground in terms of convincing people. I think what we really need are more stories, pictures of gays hanging from construction cranes in Iran, stories of women who've been killed because they danced or have been tortured. We need some testimonies and stories because this is how you sell something. And people will reach their own conclusions at some point about how crazy, how evil Iran is. We don't see enough of the effect people like your family